morning, everybody. Hope we enjoyed the break and the activity. Thank you to the organising committees, both from Smart City Support and also from TAFISA. It's my great pleasure to present to you and to hopefully start a debate and a discussion. I've slightly changed the title of my topic to present to you today. I was asked to talk about building bridges, but I think the other element of this is also not to build walls. There are two sides of the communication argument, and I think what I want to do is talk about how we build bridges and maybe knock down a few walls in Liverpool and provide that sort of experience of a particular city in the UK that can be adopted around the globe. But I guess we've got to start a little bit with the background. Some of this stuff is already well known to all of us, but we live on this little blue sphere in space at a very unique time in the development of this particular group of people, the Homo sapiens. And there's a damn hell of a lot of us. And that number is rising considerably. And one of the reasons why it's rising is we've done some really quite remarkable things to public health, lifestyle, disease prevention, interventions. We've done some absolutely marvellous work to extend our lives quite substantially in a very short period, probably only about 150 to 200 years. But it's not just the fact that there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us, and not surprisingly, the longer you live, nowadays, with the lifespan extending, more of the population is getting older. We've heard from a number of people today about ageing and some of the issues of social isolation that occurs with ageing as well. But there are lots of other issues associated with ageing that we need to be aware about. At the same time, we're rapidly urbanising. That's no surprise to anybody in the audience, given the nature of the talks today, but the numbers seem to suggest that by 2050, over 66% of us will be living in urban conurbations. And when you come to a place like Tokyo, as I do for the first time today, to a city which I think is going to be greater than 40 million people in not too distant future, you understand massive challenges associated with having lots of people in very close proximity. One of the consequences of the 21st century is we also have a lot of this. There's many people in the audience right now who are holding their phones, probably taking photos, maybe checking on the weather or the performance of their favourite sports team, answering an email. Stuart talked about this brilliantly in terms of how we've engineered physical activity of any sort out of our free time, out of our work time, out of our transport time. So we're doing a pretty good job at trying to make ourselves be physically inactive and sedentary. Those two things are both very important. At the same time, you've got these sorts of issues. Okay, it's quite clear that we've had massive changes from a dietary perspective, a farming, a food production perspective that has allowed us to feed 8 billion people on this globe, but we see some substantial dietary problems, especially associated with the younger members of society. Childhood obesity is a huge problem, and we know that many health behaviours and health circumstances track quite considerably from youth into adulthood. What does that mean? It means that we have pandemics of non-communicable diseases. Everybody's seen something like this in terms of a slide of data. 7 in every 10 deaths is to some extent preventable. But I think one of the key issues about this is these diseases are now occurring earlier in the lifespan. So we do now have children presenting with type 2 diabetes. And that means you are living with a significant health risk for a longer period of time. And somebody talked about lifespan versus health span. So, you know, we're interested in living longer, but we also want to be able to live longer. And that's quite important. So what do we need? I guess I'm going to upset a few people, I always do in these sets of circumstances, but you need leadership, and you need leaders who are going to build bridges and respond to a whole host of issues that come with living on this blue dot. And we've got people like this. Okay, I'm apologising to all of the English and American people in the audience at the moment. There are many things going on that are building bridges. There are sadly many things going on that are also erecting walls, and we've got to try and focus on the building bridges. So the nice thing I can do is that I can say, luckily for every one of these, we have one of those. Okay, Greta, who's I think in the middle of another boat trip from North America to Spain for a climate conference. And my favourite, clearly that pays into the World Cup experience in South Africa, but the best story from Celia was when asked what was his favourite thing to do. What was his favourite toy when he was growing up in South Africa? And his favourite toy was a brick. A brick. Now, I guess if you play with a brick every day of your life, you end up looking like that with muscles, and you end up winning a World Cup. But you know what he's going to be able to do, what he's going to be able to take back to his country and promote sport and physical activity in his country through that World Cup final victory is absolutely fantastic. Anyway, enough of the background. I want to talk about the bridges that have been built specifically in Liverpool. And I guess the bridges that are being built are bridges that are trying to promote people to move more, to be physically active, and to be less sedentary. Liverpool is one of those cities that I guess most of you will know something about. If you're my age or a little bit older, Liverpool probably means the Beatles. You know, so it's got a massive cultural impact upon the world. And for a lot of people in this audience, in the sporting sphere, obviously it basically is the home of two major football teams. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a second. But Liverpool's a really interesting city. 150 years ago, it was the major port in the world. It was 200 years ago possibly one of the richest cities in the world. But as a consequence of changing populations, changing transport, changing economies, Liverpool hit the year 1900 and started to disintegrate. It started to go downhill. It's currently a population of just under 500,000 people, which, you know, in Tokyo perspective means that it's a dot. But in the UK perspective, it's one of the only cities that has actually shrunk in the last 100 years. Around the turn of the 20th century, not the 21st century, turn of the 20th century, the population was almost double what it currently is. So it shrunk, and it has significantly deteriorated both from a socio-cultural perspective but also from a health perspective. It's one of the most deprived areas in England and also one of the most deprived areas in Europe. And what that means is there's substantial health inequalities. And basically, we now have a situation where somebody born in some of the areas of Liverpool lives on average 10 years less than somebody born in the south of England. So there are really significant problems for a city that is well known for its sport. So what do you do when you have that information? You have to do something. And one of the things that happened in Liverpool in 2005 was it instituted something called Liverpool Active City. And it wasn't just one of these throwaway things that you go, right, we need to just promote sport a little bit, we need to promote physical activity a little bit. It was actually a totally new approach to the organisation and the philosophy of delivery of services to people in the city. And it was about bringing everybody into the same mission statement, the same vision, the same ideas. It was about sharing resources, getting people to talk to each other, and it was absolutely about breaking down walls and building bridges between communities. So, who do you build bridges to when you're in Liverpool? Well, the first thing you do is you go to your elite sports teams. Elite sports teams are driven largely by performance and finance, but actually, in some of the places, they do have a social conscience. And the social imperative for some of the sports teams has changed massively. Here's Everton. Everton is a Premier League football team. They now have 21 socially conscious projects, vast majority of which have a physical activity and movement plan to them. And you get case studies like this, and I guess, you know, you want big issue topics, you want lots of people moving, but sometimes you just want to change one person's life. And here's Lee, who spent 18 years living, sleeping on the streets of Liverpool. And by being involved in Everton and the community, and getting involved in running a homeless football team, he's actually now got a job, he's got a meaning in life, and he's now employed, and he actually lives and works within the Everton and Liverpool community. Who else do you build bridges to? You build bridges to your urban planners. Most cities will think about this in terms of cycling lanes, building in different approaches to getting people to actively commute. We do that in Liverpool, but we go further than that. We look at our blue and green spaces in the city of Liverpool. There's lots of information now about the health benefits of being active outdoors, but also active in a community setting. So Liverpool is now opening up a lot of its blue and green spaces, it's planting more trees, it's making more of its waterways habitable by people being active. It's making its waterways cleaner, and it's putting on service provision and facilities for people to be active and engaged in the environment, and that clearly has got to have potentially positive messages for the climate and environment challenges that we face as well. Who else do you engage with? You engage with the health sector, the education sector. This is one project that we ran through the university, but it was engaged with the schools, with the Liverpool City Council, with the Liverpool Primary Care Trust, and this project, which ran over about 15 years, managed to give us 50,000 data sets of children's physical status, physical fitness, obesity, dietary information, so that we could track what was happening to our kids as they were growing up. And it provided evidence and intelligence of where we specifically targeted our interventions. You couldn't do that as one single group of people or one single siloed organisation. Who else did we talk to? Who else did we engage? We built bridges to the emergency services, but you know what? They actually built the bridge to us. Because what was happening in Liverpool in the 1980s was we were having riots. We were having riots related to race, related to social deprivation, and we had people like firefighters going to put out fires in the city of Liverpool, and those firemen were being attacked by kids. They were throwing bricks and stones and everything at them as they were trying to save people's life. What do? So, you build a brand new fire station in the middle of Toxteth. Those of you who know Liverpool will know that that's the most deprived part of the city. You build the fire station there and you make it a community facility. So that kids can go in and be physically active with the firefighters. So the firefighters can go out into the schools and not just give lessons about how to stop fires starting or how to treat fires, but can actually go, this is how active you need to be a firefighter. This is the motivation and the real focus that you need to do this. 2 or 3 years ago, the head of the fire service in the Liverpool stood up in a public arena and said, we now have 0 issues of social intolerance and inappropriate behaviour from our youths towards our firefighters. Okay. That's entirely down to their ability to build bridges to those communities, partially through physical activity. Of course, we build bridges to private business. I'm not going to go into that in any great detail at this particular point in time. But the most important one is that we build bridges to our communities and our citizens. A couple of things in Liverpool, and I'll come back to this tomorrow when we talk tomorrow. If you look at the picture on the right-hand side there, that's a group of largely girls boxing. Why? Because that's what they wanted to do. If you're a girl in Liverpool boxing, martial arts, sport like that, actually that's what they want to do. They don't want to zumba, they don't want to dance, they want to box. Okay? Let's put on sessions specifically related to what our communities and citizens want. And on the left-hand side, a real big communication campaign about advocates who are real people. And that's not to denigrate your elite athletes and your Arnold Schwarzeneggers and the people with the big muscles and the fabulous sporting performances. But sometimes people want to see us. They want to see you and they want to see me enjoying physical activity. Okay, that's it. Enough from me in terms of Liverpool, just to say that it's working quite well. It's not perfect. We aren't the most active city in the UK. We're certainly not the worst anymore. We've moved up from 8th to 4th in terms of the core cities of the UK, but we're getting more people more active. I'll finish off with a quote from an American president. So before you get too excited, it's from this gentleman here, and I'm sure some of you in the audience will spot who this is. But sometimes when we put up walls, we know who's doing it. Sometimes when we're building bridges, we actually don't know who are building the bridges. And I think this statement is a really important philosophy when you get 2 partner organisations working together. And I'll leave you with this. It's amazing what you can achieve when you don't care who takes the credit. Okay? Thank you very much for listening.
Come and take a seat. Yes, stay with us, please.